Okay, we will now begin. Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Thank you for joining us. Merci d'être parmi nous aujourd'hui. We are here today to provide an update on the City of Ottawa's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Nous sommes ici aujourd'hui pour vous fournir une mise à jour sur les mesures prises par la Ville d'Ottawa pour faire face à la pandémie de COVID-19. My name is Bern Furlong and I will be your moderator. Je m'appelle Bern Furlong et je serai l'animatrice de cette séance. Before we begin, a reminder to place your microphone on mute until I invite you to ask your question. Avant de commencer, j'aimerais vous rappeler de désactiver votre microphone jusqu'à ce que je vous invite à poser votre question. Today, we will be hearing remarks from le Maire, Jim Watson, followed by Dr. Vera Etches, Chief Medical Officer of Health, médecin chef en santé publique. Available for questions from the media following the statements, we also have disponible pour répondre aux questions des médias, nous accueillons aussi Donna Gray, General Manager, Community and Social Services Department, Directrice Générale des Services Sociaux et Communautaires, Anthony Dimonte, General Manager, Emergency and Protective Services, Directeur Général des Services de Protection et d'Urgence, Dan Chenye, General Manager, Recreation, Cultural and Facility Services, Directeur Général des Loisirs, de la Culture et des Installations, and John Manconi, General Manager, Transportation Services, Directeur Général, Transport. After we hear from the panelists, we will take questions from the media. We will begin now with remarks by Mayor Jim Watson.
Alors, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. Thank you for joining us for today's media event. Over the last few weeks, we've seen a steady decline in cases from the flare-ups of July. The item on the top of every parent's mind is whether to send their child to school or not. This is not a simple decision to make. Not having children, I can't relate to parents who are going through the angst of deciding whether to send their kids to school or not. But we know that parents that I've talked to certainly feel anxious about going back to school, or whether they're going to stay at home and do online schooling. Ce n'est pas une décision simple à prendre. Je peux comprendre que les parents et certains enfants aussi se sentiront anxieux. Even members of my own staff who have kids are struggling with this decision. As individuals, our actions over these final weeks of August will have a tremendous impact on how the start of the school year will go. We can't let ourselves get careless at this stage. COVID-19 is very much with us in the community, and we have seen that it doesn't take much for the virus to spread rapidly. That's why I want to take the opportunity to remind residents about the gathering limits for social gatherings, both indoors and outdoors. Gathering limits for indoor social gatherings are set at a maximum of 50 people and 100 people for outdoor gatherings, provided every person can stay 2 meters apart from one another. This means that just because your gathering is outside, it doesn't necessarily mean you can automatically have 100 people. So if you live in a townhouse with a small backyard, you'll only be able to have as many people as you can fit with 2 meters between each person. These same rules apply to restaurants, and we've had to use the enforcement tools at our disposal for those who have not complied. To date, we have issued one charge under the Emergency Measures and Civil Protection Act to a restaurant in the Byward Market area for failing to comply with the emergency order. The restaurant wasn't ensuring that patrons were seated properly. We also have another charge pending for another establishment. It's essential that we all do our part to continue to follow provincial orders to help stop the spread of the virus. As mentioned earlier, school is right around the corner, and I want to thank Ottawa Public Health and Dr. Etches and her team for working with our local school boards and helping them to present both in-school and online learning options to meet the needs of families and in particular children. Please remember that back to school also means more children walking and biking on our roads. This means motorists need to take extra special care while driving. Alors, les automobilistes doivent prendre des précautions particulières sur la route dans la ville. Throughout the pandemic, we've seen an increase of speeding on residential roads across the city. Motorists need to remember that speed limits are not suggestions, they are in fact the law. And as you know, we have speed cameras installed at numerous school sites in the East End, West End, South End, and the Central Core. And those are to ensure that people are not speeding, particularly in school and safety zones. It's important year-round, and especially around schools, and particularly as kids are excited, really excited this year to go back to school. Please be very, very cautious in all parts of the city, but extra cautious in and around safety zones, which are primarily school areas. With school returning soon, the city will also start up its before and after school programs. A list of locations and times will be listed on ottawa.ca on August 21st. Registration will begin at 9 p.m. on Monday, August 24th. The programs will provide physically distant arts and crafts, games and activities, including some quiet time to read and do some homework. Before I close today, I want to talk briefly about rent payments and resources during the pandemic. We realize that this pandemic has been very difficult for many people in many different ways, financially being one of them. Nous savons que cette pandémie a été très difficile pour nombreuses personnes de différentes façons, particulièrement au niveau des finances. Those who have experienced financial hardship during the pandemic may face the risk of eviction because of unpaid rent. The provincial ban on residential evictions is now ended, and the Landlord and Tenant Board is now processing eviction applications again. If you are behind on your rent or at risk of eviction because you did not pay your rent due to COVID-19, you may qualify for emergency financial help. I encourage those experiencing this issue to contact the city, and we will assess your situation to see if you qualify for that financial help. Please call 311. S'il vous plaît, appelez 311. I also want to remind everyone that the Alliance to End Homelessness Ottawa, in partnership with the City of Ottawa, community organizations, and others, recently launched a housing blitz. We're seeking help from private landlords to provide 100 affordable housing units. By the end of September, the goal is to find a home for 100 households experiencing homelessness through a collaboration between the public, private, and nonprofit sectors that will help landlords fill vacancies and residents secure housing. Landlords will be available, landlords with available units should visit ottawahousinglitz.ca for more information. That's ottawahousinglitz.ca. The city will match people in need of housing with appropriate units and rent support from available housing benefit programs. Priority, of course, will be given to people experiencing homelessness who qualify for subsidies and are currently looking for housing. If you are a landlord and you have a unit available, I encourage you to please reach out. Si vous êtes propriétaire et vous avez une unité disponible, je vous encourage à tendre la main. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Je peux commencer. I'll go ahead. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. This week, Ottawa's 4 school boards announced their back-to-school plans, and parents are making decisions about what is best for their families when it comes to sending their children back to school. And I know this hasn't been an easy time for parents and their guardians of children. So whether deciding to send your child back to school in person in September or virtually, each family needs to assess their own individual situation. Key factors in this decision include the health of your child, any underlying medical conditions, as well as the health of those in close contact with your family, for people who may be at higher risk for negative outcomes with an infection with COVID-19. Of course, the family's ability to have alternatives for childcare or time and resources to assist in education in the home are also going to be a major part of the decision. It could be that your child has a developmental need that requires assistance in the classroom by someone who's a trained professional. So, of course, we are also concerned about your children's mental health and their development. We know when schools closed last March, many parents have reported a lot of concern about missing social interactions. Les facteurs que vous devriez considérer lorsque vous prenez une décision comprennent la santé de votre enfant et la santé de vos contacts étroits et des membres de votre famille, votre capacité à trouver d'autres services de garde, votre propre disponibilité et votre situation d'emploi, si votre enfant a des besoins particuliers et évidemment la santé mentale de vos enfants. So there's no one right answer for everybody. It is a decision that each family will have to make based on their own circumstances. For my family, we've made the decision to send our children back to school, considering the variables involved, like the level of virus in our community, which is stable, the health status of our boys, and the close contacts that they have, and how available my partner and I am, could be if they were home. So ultimately, sending our children back to school is the best decision for us. Ottawa Public Health is going to continue to communicate about whether the risk in the community changes and what's happening. We'll reevaluate and share information as we become aware of the situation. We're all in this together. And I have heard from some parents that they're feeling a bit helpless about this decision, this sense that there's nothing they can do to keep their children protected if they're sending their children back to school in person. And I can tell you this isn't the case. There are concrete actions that parents and really all of us can continue that will make a difference in protecting children from COVID-19 in schools. So we must continue to do our part to keep transmission in the community low to help stop COVID-19 from entering schools in the first place. Data has shown that children who test positive for COVID-19 are getting it from the close contact they have with adults in their homes, mostly parents. Nous devons continuer de jouer notre rôle pour maintenir la transmission dans la communauté au plus bas afin d'aider à empêcher la COVID-19 d'entrer dans les écoles en premier lieu. Les données ont montré que les enfants qui reçoivent des résultats de tests positifs pour la COVID-19 l'obtiennent des membres adultes de la famille, à savoir les parents. So Ottawa, you know what to do. We've flattened the curve before, and most recently, after a spike in mid-July where we were seeing cases double week by week, we're now seeing stable numbers once more because of your actions of wearing a mask, of maintaining physical distance, and staying home when sick. And of course, exercising hand hygiene. So you've learned how to be social wise when visiting friends and seeing loved ones. So additionally, I want to stress how important it is for teachers and other school staff to stay home when they're sick and for parents to keep their children home when they are sick. De plus, je tiens à souligner à quel point il est important que les enseignants et les autres membres du personnel scolaire restent à la maison quand ils sont malades et que les parents gardent leurs enfants à la maison quand ils sont malades. So symptoms that could indicate COVID-19 infection include, but they're not limited to, feeling feverish, a new or worsening cough, difficulty breathing, sore throat, even nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea or abdominal pain, a runny nose, and nasal congestion. There's a full list of symptoms on our website. And in the past, we might have gone to work or sent a child to school with, just a cold. But in living with COVID-19, we need to be more cautious. We will continue to work with the 4 school boards to support them in implementing the provincial guidelines. Our COVID-19 school support team is providing support to superintendents, each principal, school staff. Our nurses are going to provide each principal with a checklist to ensure that their plans and practices are implemented in a way that maximizes infection prevention and control. As Ottawa Public Health liaison with the school, our nurses are going to be available and regularly present in the schools to help principals and also address questions of parents. Finally, on the subject of working, more people getting back to work, we have guidance on our website. The city's business reopening toolkit continues to be a key resource. We're also looking at additional messaging and ways to encourage all businesses to actively screen their employees. Make sure every employee, every time they come to work, is without symptoms of illness. We're promoting customer and employee logs, promoting mask use in areas that may not be covered by the city's temporary mask bylaw. And we're hosting a series of business reopening workshops to provide sector-specific considerations for a safer reopening, covering off health and safety guidelines, planning for physical distancing, the use of the cloth masks, and industry-specific issues. So we'll continue to monitor workplace and business settings and continue to provide guidance as required. COVID-19 has impacted everyone differently, but we are constantly hearing about the negative mental health impacts from business owners, from employers concerned about employees, from parents, children, youth, and older adults. So it is okay not to be okay. We're a challenging time, but there is support available. Please continue to check our website. Vous avez le droit de ne pas vous sentir bien. Aidons-nous les uns et les autres pendant cette temps difficile. Ottawa, you are doing a good job. We're getting through this. With every precaution that you take, we are one step closer to limiting transmission of COVID-19 in our community. Thank you. Merci.
Okay, I think our moderator is ready to open it up for questions. See if you're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
Okay, that's better. Okay. Sorry for the technical difficulty. Thank you, Dr. Etches, and thank you, Mayor. I will now invite questions from each agency alphabetically. You may ask one question with a follow-up. Nous allons maintenant répondre aux questions de chaque organisme par ordre alphabétique. Vous pouvez poser une question et une question de suivi. Again, a reminder to remain on mute until I invite you to ask your question. We will now start with Chris Curris, 1310 News.
Hi, I just want to make sure that you hear me okay.
Do we have Chris Curris?
Yeah, I just want to make sure, do you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Sorry, we're just in a new Zoom setup today. My question is to Dr. Etches. Can you take me through the process of Ottawa Public Health kind of going school to school to discuss the reopening and the safety plans between public health and school boards and schools?
So we are in the process of hiring 36 nurses who will be point people for the school and the principals. They are going to make sure, as I mentioned, that the principals have a checklist of things to just make sure they have reviewed before school starts. Our nurses are going to be focused on making sure, of course, first of all, that the screening is in place to look for the robustness of making sure that teachers and staff who have symptoms stay home. We'll be helping review any issues of absenteeism that come up and looking into why children might be absent. We are going to be a resource to address if there is somebody who tests positive in a school, how we identify the close contacts and inform all who need to be part of the response. An outbreak in a school is two cases that have a link between them. And in a situation like that, then the nurse will also be helping to broaden the communications and the response. Our nurses are public health nurses, so they have the whole child in mind, and they're going to be also a resource for supporting the mental health of children and youth in schools. And they're used to responding to the specific needs of specific schools. Different schools have different needs in their school population, and so really taking their cue from the school community and supporting the health of children and youth. So this is, I hope, gets at what you're asking about.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. And just as a follow-up, what can public health or the City of Ottawa do to help if physical distancing becomes a problem in schools?
So Ottawa Public Health's been talking with school boards for a long time, regular meetings about how they're approaching the return to school. And we know there's been some announcements this week from the Ministry of Education, the Minister of Education, about the ability to access more resources that could potentially make a difference in how much physical distancing is available through additional teachers or space. So we are emphasizing to the school boards. The more space between students, the better. This is the kind of thing I think they're reviewing, again, their plans with additional resources to see what can be added.
Thank you very much. We will now move to CBC Ottawa, Matthew Cooper.
Hello, can you hear me? Great.
Yes.
First, this is kind of more directed at the mayor to start. The investigation involving the bylaw officer, the assault in the Michelle Heights Park, concluded, and the bylaw officer has been fired. I mean, just in terms of this situation, the conclusion of that investigation, if you could respond and just give us a sense of what you think needs to be next coming out of this.
I can't offer a lot of comment because it's a personnel matter, a labor relations matter. I'll ask Tony DeMonte to offer a comment as much as we can. I support the staff decision. As you may know, just a few weeks ago, Councillor Suds and I sent a memo to Steve Kanalakis asking him for a full review of the situation that occurred in Marlene Catterall Park in Michelle Heights. And the results of that review were released today, and the officer was dismissed. Tony?
Thank you, Mayor. And as the Mayor indicated, unfortunately, because of labor law, we are very limited in what we can and can't say publicly on personnel matters. But I think the Mayor summed it up well. Investigation took place, and the results are now public. And basically, the policies and procedures that were in place were the checkpoint as to during the investigation of what was appropriate and not appropriate, and the conclusions were based on that. So our policies, our procedures, and our training programs, I think, were validated as a result of the analysis, and we continue to look at that and make any improvements that are necessary.
Is there anything that you want to, the Mayor and Mr. DeMonte, please, is there anything that you would say to the man who was the victim of the alleged assault? He was describing injuries to his face, for example, and this has been quite an ordeal for him. There's a pretty significant fine also associated with the interaction that happened.
So perhaps on both that question. So the first, again, because it's a personnel matter, there has been contact throughout this process and before by the Chief of Bylaw Services, Mr. Chapman. The conclusion was made public today. Mr. Chapman will be communicating our regrets to the individual on Monday and have some discussions with him. I think that's very appropriate. Your second question, part of the question was what?
The fine.
Right, the fine.
The fine. As with any judicial process, like police, bylaw officers issue fines, and then the Crown assesses what they do with that, and then it goes to the court. So we've done our part. Now it's with the Crown. We'll be assessing with bylaw whether they decide to proceed or not to court, and then if they do, then again the court will decide whether the fine holds or not. So that's in the judicial process right now, and we have no say in that.
Thank you very much. We will now move to CTV Ottawa, Josh Pringle.
Thank you very much. My question is for the Mayor. This morning you were talking about, on CTV Morning Live, you were talking about your conversation with the Premier. We were just wondering if you could discuss what you discussed with the Premier about, especially when it comes to schools, and when would the city need a decision from the boards on whether they will be using the properties for classes if needed?
Thank you, Josh. I indicated to the Premier that we had offered city facilities if there was a need for extra space. And obviously, we have a lot of facilities, whether they're recreation centers or community centers, and they're not well used during the school hours generally. There are some programs after 4 and so on. So those spaces are available for the school boards. To the best of my knowledge, I don't believe we've been contacted at this point asking for any space. I use the example, for instance, of the high school that's attached to the Walter Baker Center in Barrhaven. Lots of open space at the rec center, and it's literally attached to the school. And we have a library there as well. So those are the kinds of examples of where we have surplus space that's not used during the school hours that would be made available, and he was appreciative of our initiative. So that offer is before the school boards, and I think they are working, almost around the clock trying to get the schools ready, and they haven't really looked at that as an option. But I think it certainly is one that we're prepared to sit down and discuss and let them use this property and this public space to try to make sure that there's proper physical distancing.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do. It's either for the mayor or Mr. DeMonte. You mentioned that the city has fined or charged one restaurant for not seating patrons properly. Is the city conducting proactive enforcement through the Byward Market and other areas to make sure all bars and restaurants are following the rules? And so far, what's been the level of compliance? Are you seeing good compliance by everybody?
So, as Dr. Etch has been said, this community has stepped up as the next phase opened up in the Byward Market. People were getting organized, etc. The property owners there and the businesses have done a tremendous job and quickly turned around and put in place the measures that were necessary. So yes, the first weekends we had significant presence there and proactively educating and helping support them to understand what they needed to do. And I think the reflection, and the mayor mentioned that only one charge had to be issued and another one is pending. And we've done several visits, and there's been no other compliance issues. And as a matter of fact, proactively, people are reaching out both to public health and to us to just ensure they're doing the right thing. So I think we're on the right track with regards to that.
Thank you very much. Nous allons maintenant à Julien Paquette, Le Droit.
Oui, la question est pour M. Watson. Plus tôt cette semaine, vous avez annoncé que le gouvernement provincial va offrir, si ma mémoire est bonne, 124 millions pour vous aider. Dans le fond, est-ce que c'est pour vous aider directement avec le déficit qu'on anticipe cette année?
Oui, certainement. C'est un total de 125 millions de dollars de la province et le gouvernement fédéral pour aider avec des choses comme le transport en commun, les coûts plus hauts aux santé publique, les paramedics, les services de police, etc. Mais comme tu sais, Julien, on avait une projection d'un déficit de 192 millions de dollars. Alors, pour le moment, nous sommes très contents avec la décision le gouvernement de M. Ford et M. Trudeau, mais c'est nécessaire pour nous autres de continuer de convaincre les deux autres paliers du gouvernement que c'est nécessaire d'ajouter presque 67 millions de dollars plus pour aider avec le budget et le déficit de 2020. Et comme pendant mon dialogue avec le ministre Mulroney, certainement, elle comprend qu'il y a des grands défis avec des grandes villes comme Toronto et Ottawa, avec des grands systèmes de transport en commun. Et il y a une deuxième étape des applications pour plus des subventions en septembre. Alors, certainement, je parlais avec le trésor aujourd'hui, excusez-moi, et elle va, comme on dit, apply pour plus d'autres fonds dans le mois de septembre et octobre. Et j'ai beaucoup de confiance que les deux autres niveaux du gouvernement vont aider nous autres pour éliminer notre déficit ici à Ottawa. Parce que maintenant, on estime que le déficit est 192 millions de dollars jusqu'à la fin de l'année, parce que la fin de l'année, c'est notre fin et c'est aussi notre fin de l'année fiscale.
OK, donc, si je comprends bien, il reste un 67 millions qu'on espère encore pouvoir obtenir également des gouvernements supérieurs, des paliers de gouvernement supérieurs. Donc, c'est pas de l'argent qui va être, en théorie, prise à partir du budget de la ville. Il n'y aura pas de coupure de dépenses.
Par exemple, on a annoncé il y a quelques mois que 4200 employés temporaires ont perdu leur emploi parce qu'il n'y a pas de travail pour ces personnes de faire, par exemple, des personnes qui sont responsables pour le Zamboni et des leçons dans une piscine et des choses comme ça. Mais ça va aider avec notre déficit. Et ce n'est pas nécessaire si on avait un autre 67 millions de dollars de couper des personnes ou des programmes et des choses comme ça. Le prochain défi pour nous autres, certainement, c'est le mois de janvier parce que je ne pense pas qu'on a vu une grande augmentation des passagers au Sea Transpo le 1er janvier. Et c'est probablement nécessaire de convaincre les deux autres paliers du gouvernement d'aider toutes les municipalités avec les fonds pour le budget de 2021. Mais pour le moment, la priorité est de trouver une solution pour l'année 2020.
OK. Donc, si je peux juste clarifier,
Oui.
dans le fond, il y a encore des inquiétudes pour l'année prochaine parce que les revenus ne seront pas ce qu'ils étaient dans les dernières années.
Oui, c'est ça, parce que la situation, je ne pense pas que c'est la fin de COVID-19. Le 31 décembre, on avait toujours des problèmes avec COVID-19 en 2021. Et ça, c'est une nouvelle année fiscale. Le problème est l'année fiscale et la fin de cette année fiscale est le 31 décembre. Pour le gouvernement du Canada et la province, c'est le 31 mars. Il y a un petit problème avec ça, mais pour le moment, j'ai beaucoup de confiance qu'on a trouvé une solution pour des finances pour la ville et pour la santé publique pour cette année. Et c'est important pour nous autres de continuer de travailler avec les autres maires et les autres ministres, le Premier ministre Ford et le Premier ministre Trudeau, pour convaincre leur gouvernement d'aider les municipalités, pas seulement à Ottawa, c'est un problème pour tous les 444 municipalités dans la province de l'Ontario. Mais c'est un plus grand problème pour des grandes municipalités parce que la grande moitié de les 125 millions de dollars, 75 millions de dollars est seulement pour le transport en commun parce qu'on perd beaucoup de l'argent et nos coûts sont plus hauts pour les opérations de Sea Transpo et les autobus et le train léger.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Merci. We will now move to Aidan Helmer, Ottawa citizen.
Hello, I have a question for Mayor Watson.
Hi, Aidan.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. You had called for a full review, obviously, into this bylaw incident. We've now heard the conclusion of the internal investigation. I'm wondering if there is anything next as far as that full review into the training requirements, any code of conduct violations that may have happened. And I'm wondering if you can reflect on that conclusion in light of, obviously, what is the firing of the bylaw officer, but also that this happened during a crackdown in April where 43 tickets were issued. This was one of a larger campaign. I'm wondering if you reflect any differently on the messaging at that time in April in light of what's happened now.
Yeah, again, as I indicated, Aidan, because the matter is a personnel matter, a labor relations matter, the individual has the right to appeal. It would be inappropriate for me to offer comments on the specific case. I can say, though, that bylaw, I'm not talking about that case, but overall the issue of the tickets being issued, there were well over 1,000 plus calls for service, and very few tickets were actually issued. I think Tony can give you the exact numbers, but it was certainly, as I recall, less than 50 or so that were issued in violation of activities, whether it's in parks or other public spaces. So, bylaw tries their very best to use education and encouragement first and foremost, because that's the Canadian way of doing things. But unfortunately, we had cases where barbershops and hair salons were operating illegally. People were continuously, gathering in public spaces when they were not allowed to in the parks. And at some point, you have to say enough is enough. and we need, to hit these people in the pocketbook so that they understand that we're serious. Because the last thing we wanted to do is to have more flare-ups of COVID-19. We've had almost 300 people in our community die as a result of the virus. So I think it's important that Bylaw, first and foremost, uses education, politely asks people to move on. That's why we brought in the Park Ambassador program that allowed people to ask questions, and ambassadors politely asked parents to keep their kids off the play structures because that was not safe. And again, in a city of 1 million, to have 50 or 60 tickets issued, and I stand to be corrected on that number, Tony, but it was a very small percentage of the calls that we received, and certainly a very minuscule percentage of the overall population. The vast majority of people followed the rules, understood it was in their interest and self-interest to ensure that people were not spreading the virus. And Tony, do you want to offer any other comment, please?
Yeah, just quickly, Mayor. I think you recognize it well. I think in the broader context, we were a tool as part of the objective that we all had as a community to meet our public health targets, and it was very successful. Those 40 some odd tickets equated to less than 1%. So basically less than 1% of the thousands of calls that we were called to respond ended up in a ticket. And as the mayor said, unfortunately, in some cases, persuasion and education doesn't work, so we have to go to the next step. So it's a very, very small percentage. And I think the mayor clearly said, and I think that's what's important to remember, our community objective here was the public health, and we were just assisting in that objective.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up, Aidan?
I would just ask, thank you very much for that, both of you gentlemen. Councillor Sudds has released a statement basically saying that she is dedicated to working and continuing to build those strong relationships with the community. She also mentions de-escalation. I'm wondering if perhaps the mayor could reflect on some of those conversations that he might be having with his fellow councillors on this, and where those conversations might head in the future. Thanks.
Yeah, I think, Councillor Sudds, as you know, is the chair responsible for the Bylaw service. So, she and I worked on the original memo to Mr. Kanalakis. We appreciate the work that he and Mr. DeMonte and Mr. Chapman did. And at the end of the day, we continuously will strive to do better and to ensure that our officers have the necessary training to continue to do the work, the important work that they have to do in their own communities. So certainly Chair Sudds will take the lead on that. But again, we have to, I'm not trying to be evasive, but it is inappropriate to comment on a specific case. We released the details of the officer being dismissed, and I can't really offer any more specific comment on that case.
Thank you very much. We will now move on to Taylor Blewett, Ottawa Sun.
Thanks. My first question is for Dr. Etches. The Ottawa Student Transportation Authority this week released their plan for the return to school. And the plan says buses will carry a full load of 48 to 70 students, sitting 2 to 3 per bench. They note that Ottawa Public Health is reviewing that. So I'm wondering, have you reviewed it, and are those numbers acceptable, particularly considering that masks aren't required for students in kindergarten to grade 3?
Thank you. We have been in conversation with the province about our desire to see more physical distancing on buses, and I think that this is still under review in terms of what might be accomplished.
Thank you. And do you have a follow-up, Taylor?
Yes, please. On a different topic, if Donna Gray is here, she'd probably be the best person to answer this, but if not, I guess directed to the mayor.
Donna's here.
Oh, perfect. Going back to your earlier comments, Mayor, about the resources available for people who've had challenges paying their rent because of the pandemic, they're potentially facing eviction. Does the city have a sense for the scale of this right now? Like how many, not exact numbers, obviously, but how many people are potentially in this situation? And the pot of money where these resources are available, where's that coming from, and how much could be available to people?
Thank you. So, with the ban just lifting recently, we were not sure what we're going to see in terms of evictions as we move forward. We do know, though, that the ban has been very effective in keeping people housed during the COVID pandemic to date. And I think our priority in this community is to keep people sheltered and housed and do what we can to ensure that people maintain their housing. So paying for preventative methods so that people don't end up evicted is important to us. The budget, the money comes from is a provincial housing benefit fund that is meant as a preventative measure as part of our housing and homelessness program. And then the municipality does contribute money through discretionary benefits as well. And so the amount available is really dependent on an eligibility criteria. So people would apply and they would assess their situation and look at that in an individual case basis and then make payment as appropriate. Does that answer your question, Taylor?
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, nous allons à Rosalie Sinclair, Radio-Canada.
Hello, my question is for Mr. Manconi. We saw this week a number of your employees and drivers not wearing a mask or not wearing it correctly in your train's transit station. Some of your employees have contracted COVID-19. So I'm wondering, doesn't it put the users at risk when your employees do not protect themselves?
So just on numbers, in terms of operators, and I remind everybody, we've got about 2,000 bus and rail operators out there. So perspective is everything. We've had 7 since the beginning of the pandemic that have had COVID. We work in partnership with public health partners, and we do contact tracing and so forth. And that's the proactive messaging that you see in those memos that go out. And while that may seem like a lot, there's only been 7. I think we might be up to 8 in total. And then we had some maintenance staff internally, a handful of them. So total to date as of yesterday, 13 employees out of a staff complement of about 3,000. And that doesn't even include the contracted resources that we have. Is our objective is that we want all our operators and staff that are out on the system wearing masks. We are doing spot checks. We are doing reminders. No system is perfect. And one of the things that we have noticed is sometimes we get reports of operators not wearing their masks. And when we trace it down, we find it's a vehicle that is what's called deadheading. It's in between routes. And they are fully authorized to do that. When the bus is totally vacant, there's nobody in there, and they're switching from one route to another. So in numerous, not all, there has been a few instances, including I was on a bus and one of our operators was not wearing a mask, and I told him to put his mask on. So, but we have very, very high compliance with our operators and with our customers. We do get some reports of not everybody wearing a mask, and a reminder that not everybody can. But I say we're doing very well overall. A reminder that we were the first jurisdiction in Canada to do masks, and there was a lot of pushback, and now just every transit agency in Canada is doing the same. It's so what Dr. Etches and the mayor have been talking about, and you heard my colleague Tony, all of us working together. So we've got the checks and balances, and when we do get a report, we track the bus down and we talk to the operator.
Thank you. And do you have a follow-up?
Yes. So is there measures in place to punish these employees? And if they're not wearing a mask for a medical reason, are they authorized to be on the front lines with users?
No. So again, we have a great working relationship with our union and our health and safety group. We have, I believe, 10 operators that have medical restrictions that preclude them from wearing a mask. So they're on alternate duties. They do not drive. And in terms of someone that is not wearing the mask and breaking the protocol, there's appropriate discipline in place. We talk to them and we make sure that they follow the rules and could result in discipline. But again, our operators have been through this whole pandemic, showing up every day, sometimes even leaving their family behind to come in and move the city around. They've done a phenomenal job. Yes, there's always a few, but very, very proud of the men and women that have been doing a great job of wearing a mask behind a barrier, for 8 hours a day. It's a tough job. And so my hat goes off to them. And so while there's some few instances, I always focus on the great men and women, those thousands that are showing up every day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. This is all the time we have. C'est tout le temps que nous disposons aujourd'hui. Have a wonderful afternoon and a great weekend. Bonne journée.
Thank you. Merci. Bye-bye.